Hello, everybody. I'm Chris Staley from Agile Meridian, and welcome to our 40th episode of Agile Shorts. Today, we're going to talk about why do developers hate Agile. And with me today is my buddy Kumar. How are you doing?
Hey, everyone. Yeah, so this is actually something that seems to come up often on these Quora boards and things like that, where especially developers just have this bad impression of Agile. And certainly, I don't know about you, but certainly in a lot of the clients that I'm helping, serving, that developers just don't really like it, right?
Yeah.
They hate it. What do you think some of those reasons are, Chris?
There are a lot of good reasons on why developers hate it. I think, in my opinion, it's been bad implementations, right? Bad coaches that go in and talk about, they go in and they're dogmatic about what the process is. They really don't understand why they're doing what they're doing and why they're instructing the team. And so it becomes very much a process like waterfall, right? In waterfall, we do this and then we do this and then we do this. And we don't question. And it's that same kind of approach as my experience in Agile. How about you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, a lot of it is implementation. You're right. Some of it can be attributed to coaching, and it's really not coaching. It's consultants that come in that have they've sold a big bill of goods, if you will. I mean, I'm not saying that all coaches are like this, but certainly some are like this. They sold a bill of goods to leadership saying, hey, you need to go Agile because it'll help you, 10x your productivity. And you can, obviously people are going to be like, oh, really? Let's try this, but what they don't realize is that Agile is not about just about the process, about the steps, about a methodology. It's more about a mindset. And leaders are not really that invested in investing the time to change the mindset. And so what happens is a suboptimal implementation of Agile and Scrum, which leads to disillusionment. And certainly developers are probably the ones that feel the brunt of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Isn't that what you were describing? Isn't that where, or at least in my experience, it seems like it's where the leadership is looking for a silver bullet. There's a lot of intuitive things that are wrong in an organization, and somebody has sold to them that Agile is going to be the fix all their problems. It's going to solve world hunger. It's going to solve global warming. All they have to do is implement it. It's easy. And to your point, it ends up being bad, right?
Yeah, because there's not there. People don't take a systemic view of change, right? It's, people view Agile as a methodology, hey, let's just go implement this thing and things will move better. We'll be able to deliver faster and so on and so forth. And so it's more about the output rather than the outcome. And leaders aren't. I'm not saying leaders are to blame for this, certainly, but they have a part to play in it, right? Because they're the ones signing the check, but they're not actually doing the work of demonstrating the change, demonstrating what kind of organization they want to become.
Right.
Right. And so developers, I mean, they're kind of in the ugly end of the stick, right? And for them, it's like before it was they had time to really think about the work that they had to do. They had time to work with their colleagues to, come up with the solutions and test it out and so on and so forth. And if I'm a developer and all of a sudden we're doing Agile, oh my God, I'm doing a meeting every day, 15-minute stand-up that turns into an hour-long status meeting. And then I got to go to some planning session or a refinement session. I've got to go to this architectural session with some architects, and I'm in meetings all day. So when do I have time to develop? So of course they're going to hate Agile because this new change was brought in and it's limited the amount of time they have to do what they love to do, which is come up with solutions to problems, through code, or it doesn't have to be a software developer. It could be a marketing developer, or it could be a lawyer, a legal assistant. That Agile is everywhere now, right? Because it's been used in so many industries. And so on the ugly end of the stick, these people are just through these bad implementations are having to endure a lot of bureaucracy. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Every team that I've gone into, or every organization I've gone into where I've had to have help them get moving, it's that dogmatic approach where they get told this is the way that we're going to do this, and then what happens is you do it and they really don't understand why. It reminds me of that concept of the burning platform, right? Most of the time we don't talk to developers about why do we need to do Agile, right? We're doing Agile right now. Why? If they don't see the problem, it's gonna appear to them that we're just putting a burden on them, right? Giving them more work. So yeah, I agree.
Why is it that change is so hard? It seems like, a leader, someone says, okay, let's try this Agile thing, and they implement it. Why do you suppose change is hard, and especially for people at the, as I put it, the ugly end of the stick, right? The ones that get impacted the most by these changes. Why do you suppose that is?
It's interesting because it reminds me of a parable that I heard about 5 monkeys, and a researcher. The parable goes like this: a researcher took 5 monkeys and put them in a room, and then in the middle of the room was a ladder with a bunch of bananas on it. And every time the monkeys would go up on the ladder, the researchers would spray them with cold water. And the monkeys just got to a point where they wouldn't do anything about it. And they wouldn't go up the ladder. They just quit trying. They didn't want to get sprayed. And then the researchers started replacing the monkeys with, monkeys that had gotten sprayed with a new monkey that hadn't been sprayed. And eventually they'd gone through and replaced all the monkeys, and yet the bananas weren't there or touched, right? And the reason they weren't touched is because every time they put a new monkey in, the other monkeys who had been sprayed would fight at it, bite at it, pull it back down off the ladder because they didn't want to get sprayed. So they'd pull it down. And eventually that new monkey, would learn not to go up the ladder. Well, after a while, after they'd replaced them all, the monkeys didn't go up the ladder to get the bananas, even though none of them had been sprayed. And, it's that idea that kind of came up when you and I were talking about this before, whether this was a good topic or not, right? Is that, what do you think the monkeys were thinking, in terms of why they wouldn't go up the ladder?
Yeah, it's a good parable, and it's a good parable for cultural change, right? So the way things work around here, you don't necessarily hear that exact phrase, but some variation of that. Hey, Kumar, that's not how things work around here. That to me sounds like the monkeys sort of telling me, hey, get off the damn ladder so you don't get sprayed.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Things don't work that way around here, Kumar. What are you talking about? We can't do that. And so it's a big element to change, and why change is so hard is because, culture norms, habits that people form. When you go into a new organization, you tend to want to conform to what everyone else is doing, so you don't stand out too much. And so you're not going to climb that ladder, get that banana, even though it's the shortest path to get the banana. You're not going to do it because no one else is doing it. You look around and it's like, hey, all the other monkeys are just sitting around this room. They're not going up there. I'm not going to do it. Something must be wrong. Or I might try it and somebody's going to say, hey, Kumar, you don't want to do that. You're going to get in trouble.
Right.
So I think maybe that's part of it. Developers are used to a certain style of working. And if Agile isn't explained, the why behind it isn't explained to them, if the burning platform isn't shared with everyone in the organization as to why an organization is moving to a new style of working, then it's going to be really hard for people, especially on the ugly end of the stick, to understand these changes. And certainly poor implementation doesn't help.
Yeah.
Agile's not about meetings endlessly. It's not about that, right? But I think the thing that us coaches have to do is move away from this notion of checklist agile.
Yeah.
I'm involved in a transformation right now and working with some coaches, and I'm not going to say who or where, but just working with some coaches, and it feels very checklisty. And granted, this organization needs to change a lot, right? The why was never explained to them, but yet I'm thinking that the approach that, and we're going we're talking about the approach to take, and I don't think this is the right approach. Checklist agile. Hey, make sure you do your stand-ups, and make sure you do this, and make sure you do that. I mean, those things are important for sure, but I think it's more important to have that connection with the people, the humans that are going through this change, and figure out what's going to work for them.
Right.
If and really, what is in it for the organization, right, Chris? I mean, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that we need to do a better job of communicating what is in it for them, right? And how they do it. We don't necessarily as well, if the team's killing it. I've got a team that I went in and helped last year that was, in the organization, that the entire organization was going agile, but this team is killing it.
Yeah.
And they were doing some of the scrum processes, but not all of them, but yet they were killing it. And, people got on me about, well, you should make them change. You're not being, they're not doing scrum. And my point was, if it's working, why mess with it? Right. Only when you have an opportunity to change, do it then, right? When things aren't working well, and just don't do it just because you want to change things, right? You want it culturally. The culture's not going to let you change a team that's a high performing team, and on the other hand, they will let you change a team that's in the dumps. That's the team you want to go into because they'll listen to you, right? And that's an opportunity to go in and introduce Agile and do it in a way that makes sense. But you've got to make sure that there's that main reason on why, right? Because that culture always pushes back.
Yeah. Another thing I see often is that, people equate Agile to Scrum, and they're not the same. Agile is not equal to Scrum. Scrum is not Agile. I mean, Scrum is Agile, but Agile is not equal to Scrum.
Right.
And what I mean by that is Agile is really just a mindset. It's a set of values and principles, as as many of our viewers might know. It's a mindset. It's a way of working. You're collaborating often. It's business and developers working together on a continual basis. It describes nothing in terms of rules or checklists. Nothing. There's no methodology there. It's just a set of values and principles, and that's all. Scrum is a very lightweight framework that when you follow it and you follow the ceremonies and create the artifacts and all that, it manifests many, if not all, of the Agile values and principles. But they're not the same. And a lot of times people bastardize the implementation of Scrum, give Scrum a bad name, but they're sort of forced into doing some of these things that may not fit the culture of that team or the culture of the company. So it's best to really understand what is it that you're trying to accomplish through an Agile implementation. What's the outcome that you're looking for? A lot of times Agile consultants will say, "Hey, 10x your productivity." That's an output, but what's the outcome? It's important, I think, for Chris, I'm sure you'll agree, it's to move towards outcomes and away from outputs. Right. And if we keep that in mind and understand that Agile is not Scrum, I think that maybe our developer friends will maybe not hate Agile so much.
Right. And you bring up that 10x. That's a good point, because you will see usually you will see when a team moves to Scrum or moves to Agile, you'll see some improvement, right, in productivity. But the other side of it too is you're working on the most important things because you're working in priority order, right? Whereas in a traditional environment, you might be working on what somebody believes is the highest priority, but not really, right? Might be the
Yeah.
loudest person in the room, might be the person with the highest pay grade, or something like that. But that does get overinflated. And when a scrum master or when somebody goes into an organization and says, "Oh, you're going to see X amount of productivity increase," I'm immediately trying to pull that person aside and say, "Hey, you don't want to say that, right? Because it might not be, right?
Yeah.
It might be you're doing the same productivity. You're just delivering better quality stuff, and it's
Yeah.
higher priority or it's higher value."
Right. Right. I mean, the capacity of the team doesn't change necessarily,
Right.
unless the organization is so dysfunctional that, Scrum is, it can be a huge productivity boost, but it really depends on the organization, where it starts from, and how it's agile and these ways of working are implemented.
Yeah. A good analogy for outcomes versus outputs is that idea of we're going to count. It's an old one, but we're going to count the number of lines of code, right? The output is you're going to end up with lots and lots of lines of code, right? And that's great. But does the thing work? Is it getting the benefits that we expected, right?
Right.
The end user, are they getting more value out of it than they were before we started this?
Yeah.
And that's why I like your comment about, I like this comment and approach that you just mentioned about moving towards outcomes. I think we as organizations need to do that. I think our manufacturing backgrounds all are about outputs, right? How many cars do we produce, or how many widgets do we produce? But we really want to be focused on those outcomes, I think.
Right. I agree with you on that. And I think that most leaders, that are implementing Agile in their organizations are thinking in terms, they're thinking in terms of outcomes for most other things. However, in some cases, many cases maybe, Agile is not about how they can achieve those outcomes. It's more an interim step. It's like, okay, this will help me. I think it'll help me increase our output or our productivity, or maybe help me increase our quality. It's more output based than it is outcome based. And so I think we should figure out how we can change the dynamic, change the conversation a little bit on that end.
Yeah.
And just so that, our developers, the people on the front lines that are doing the work, whatever they're developing, aren't unduly burdened.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's something that we need to think about. How does this impact our frontline workers? The people that are the knowledge workers, the people that have the skills and the knowledge to be able to turn something into a piece of value that can be delivered to a customer. Those people are bearing the brunt of all the changes that we just nonchalantly just sign off on as leaders. Not that I'm anyway. So we need to be careful about that and make sure that the change is understood, that we really move towards outcomes and explain the why. And if developers are rebelling a little bit about it, the solution isn't to come down harder on them. It's to listen. It's to go to the team and listen. What is it about Agile you don't like? And they will tell you, they'll tell you what they don't like about it. And everything that they will say are probably things that are keeping them from doing their best work. So listen to them and keep that in mind. I'm not saying that you go back to traditional ways of working, but what I'm saying is go back to the values and principles of Agile, right? And listen to your team. Any other thoughts, Chris, before we close this short out? Because we can talk about this all day.
Yeah, we could. No, I think we pretty well covered it for the time that we have. Like, I agree with you. We could take any one of these topics, any one of these subtopics that we've talked about, and break it down and spend an entire Agile short talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this was a good conversation.
Yeah, it was. Thank you. Thank you for joining me in this call, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks for our next Agile short.
All right. Bye, everybody.